You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof blew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsor. Angler's Coffee roasts a full range of coffee with one goal in mind, delivering excellent coffee to every single angler. With a blend for every taste, a dry dropper on-the-go tea bag option, and a roast sampler, you know Joe at Anglers has you covered. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/anglers right now to support a sustainable company with unsurpassed taste. That's Anglers, ANGLERS. We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you doing, Bill?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. It's a little earlier than I'm used to getting up, except for fishing, but I'm doing real good, thanks.
That's right. Are you? So you're not really an early riser as much unless it's for fishing?
No, I'm mostly a late stayer upper.
Yeah.
Than an early riser, yeah.
That's right. What would be a late stay up in the night?
Oh, it's changing a little bit with my age now, but it was, I go out to my workshop around 9 or 10 at night and come in around 1 or 2 in the morning. So, and out there I got all my fly tying stuff, and I take my computer, and so I do a little writing and tie some flies and stuff out there.
Perfect. Well, we're going to talk about your background. You've got a lot of years, probably more than most, in fly fishing, and we'll talk about how long that is. And it seems like you've done just about everything. I think you've owned a fly shop or two. You've done just about everything, including carp fishing, which we're going to talk about today as well.
Good.
But before we get into all that and talk about, and I also want to touch on the carp or the fly fishing invitation you have focused in Washington. But take us back to fly fishing real quick. How did you first get into it? What's your first memory of fly fishing?
Let's see. Well, my first memory of fly fishing was that I've always tended to do things the hard way, not on purpose. It just happens that way. And nobody in my family fly fished. And it just seemed like when I read about it and when I saw it on TV, just seemed like a fun thing to do. Everything that was involved in it, it just wasn't buying a lure and chucking it out there. The fly tying, the rod building, the entomology, just everything about it. And so I went down to, it isn't there anymore. I went down to a local sporting goods store that sold rod building stuff, and I actually made my first fly rod. And I used that for actually several years.
Where was this at? Which state was this in?
This is in Washington. Yeah, started all in Washington.
So you grew up in like Western Washington, or where in Washington?
I didn't grow up here. Actually, my fishing started as a very young boy in Oklahoma with a cane pole, not a cane rod, but a cane pole, and with a bobber and worms or minnow or something like that.
What's the difference between a cane rod and a cane pole?
Well, the cane rod, which I also made in my early days, is crafted from bamboo, but it is heat treated, it's split, it's planed to within 1/1000th of an inch for 6 pieces that are then put together as a hexagon and then fitted together as a rod that has a continuous taper on it, like modern rods are now, but they're made of bamboo. And the reason they were is that bamboo has a good quality of taking a bend and then recovering quickly. And it's that recover time that makes it a good caster.
Yeah.
And so that's why the early rods were made, not the early rods, but the rods in the turn of the century and up through the 40s, made mostly of bamboo. Then with the discovery of fiberglass, that came in a lot less expensive, a lot easier for people to get a hold of. And that was the rod of choice, or the material of choice for rods for years. Then came graphite and boron and so on up till modern day materials.
Yep. So you grew up in Oklahoma, and then you made your way eventually out to Washington.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And and out here is where I eventually got started in fly fishing.
Gotcha.
And I was in the service, and I'd made my rod, so I got transferred to Mobile, Alabama, and my wife and I had a canoe, and we also had a tent trailer, and we had a Volkswagen Fastback, so I strapped the canoe on top of the Volkswagen and pulled a tent trailer, and we went from here to Mobile. And down there I did a lot of fishing for bass and sea trout. And I asked, I remember when I went down there, I asked them, "Do you have any trout fishing down there?" "We sure do. We got green trout." I said, "What's a green trout?" They said, "Well, green trout. It's a bass."
Oh.
So that was my introduction.
That's right. The bass is I've heard that talk about the Midwest too. They say the native trout of the Midwest is the bass, is the smallmouth bass or something like that, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. So I fish for bass and bluegill and crappie and stuff like that down there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And in all this, when did was it the Blue Dun fly shop?
Blue Dun, yeah.
How'd you come to own? I think you owned a fly shop, right?
I did. Yes.
How did that come to be?
It was kind of always a dream. I worked at REI, and I worked for a long time, and then I had this thought in the back of my mind of owning a fly shop and offering classes and things like that. And I worked at REI before I went into the service. In '66, I went into the Coast Guard, and I got out in '70. Then I worked at REI again from '70 to '75. And while there, I introduced fly fishing through REI with classes, fly tying classes and fly casting classes, actually. I was one of the first ones. Actually, it was the Washington Fly Fishing Club, a bunch of those guys out of Green Lake that really started doing classes for everybody. And then I was one of the first individuals that started doing it. And then I just kind of stuck with it. And then I had a chance to work for this rod building company. They didn't always build just fly rods, but a company called Totem Trader. And what I liked about it most is I lived in Woodinville, and I worked downtown REI, and it was situated out in Carnation. And I don't know if you're familiar with the geography around here, but Carnation is all the back country roads to get to from my house, from Woodinville. And then REI was driving all the highways and toll booths and downtown and everything to get to. So I really liked the idea of being in Carnation, a small town, maybe a couple thousand people, and that was it. So I went out there for a while, and then I quit, and I was on my own. My brother and I had been putting together a movie this whole time, and it's called Angler's Autumn. It won some awards, and it's been shown a long time, especially now because it's sort of a classic, because it's got some years on it.
Yeah. What year did Angler's Autumn come out?
76.
76. Wow.
Yeah. And we always get a thrill out of showing it at some clubs and things like that. And we also did an ongoing slideshow through the 70s that we did mostly in Eastern Washington. And that was called Wind, Sand, and Trout. And that shows some of the famous, they're not fly fishing only, but they were restricted gear only lakes. But at that time, there were no trees. Now it's just the shoreline's covered with trees. The little creeks are choked over with trees, and you can't get to it. So it's a good point of history in showing those two movies. So anyway, back to the shop. I really wanted to do this, and my wife and I thought, well, it's about time we got out of Seattle and went to Wenatchee. And so we did, and then while I was there, I met a few guys that fly fished and decided to open my first fly shop, Blue Dun.
In Wenatchee?
Yes, in Wenatchee.
That's right. And I'm not sure, is the Blue Dun, is that still going?
No. It opened the one in Wenatchee, then it went to East Wenatchee. Then I bought another fly shop in Spokane, and I moved to Spokane to run that one. And then in 2000, 2005, we decided to give that up. I wanted a paycheck.
Yeah.
So that was the main impetus of getting out of that job.
Right.
I was offered a job down at the fly shop down in Redding, California, and he put me in the travel department, which I was kind of known for, and taking people on trips and things, especially saltwater stuff. So they put me in charge of the warm saltwater. So that took me through my fly casting career.
Gotcha. And did you move down to California, or did you stay up in Washington?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moved down there in 2005, and I worked for him, traveled all over the world. It was a pretty cool job. It's probably one of the best.
That is a cool job.
Yeah, I thought about auctioning it off when I left, but they wouldn't let me.
Yeah. That's a great job. Yeah, gotcha. So and you did a lot of traveling. We'll probably touch on that a little bit as we go here. But what was the fly? I'm always interested in the fly shop, experience. What was it like for you? What did you enjoy most about, owning a fly shop?
Just being my own boss. We've been our own boss. My wife and I own beauty supplies. She's in the beauty business, and we own 3 different shops in Seattle area.
Oh, wow.
And when we moved over to Wenatchee, we still had those, so we eventually sold those off, and then it was just the fly shop.
Quick word from our sponsor, Smitty's Fly Box, delivering monthly flies, fly materials, and accessories each month with their Smitty's subscription fly box. Smitty's has been producing high-quality flies and materials for over 30 years, so now it's time to take the guesswork out of fly time materials and patterns. You can support this podcast right now and get a great selection of flies and fly time materials right now at Smitty's Fly Box. That's Smitty's, SMITTYS, Smitty'sFlybox.com. And what do you think was the toughest thing about owning a fly shop?
The toughest thing about owning a fly shop was not carrying it through to the end. My dream was always to retire, come in once or twice a week and sign checks and then go back out fishing.
Right. That's right. We've had a lot of fly shop owners on, and there's always this interesting thing where you hear them say that they want to own a fly shop, and then when they get in, they realize that, wow, you kind of can get stuck in the fly shop. That's a tough thing, because it's hard. People come for you in the shop, right? Because you're the guy,
right?
And I grew up around a little fly shop as well, and I remember, it was tough because that one went away eventually as well. And I remember how, it was a little painful. Now that I look back on it, I think it was a good thing. You know what I mean? Kind of hindsight is, and all that. But I hear what you're saying though. It is one of those things where it's hard to let go, right? It was like your baby, I'm sure.
It really was. And Wenatchee's small enough where I knew a lot of people, and it was fun when Judy and I, my wife and I, would go out to dinner or something. I'd see somebody or one of the customers, or I'd run into them on the river. I did start guiding when I was over there, guiding the Wenatchee River, steelhead. And I really enjoyed that because before I moved over to Wenatchee, I'd given up fly fishing for steelhead. I've been in Woodinville for 20 years, and I got tired of 37 degrees and rain and wind.
Right.
And I just decided I don't want to do this anymore, and sold my drift boat. And when we went over to Wenatchee, and I knew there was some fly fishing in Wenatchee, and when I just opened the shop, I decided I was going to do some. But a friend of mine came over. He and his girlfriend, and they were from Seattle area, and he knocked on my door one morning, and I said, hey, Joe, how you doing? And he said, I'm fine. We're going down the river and fish. You want to go? And I said, oh, I don't know, I guess. So I went down there, and Joe was quite a talker. We called him the Diesel because you just never turned him off. He just kept running and running and running. But we all loved him. And his girlfriend was an accomplished fly fisher and caster too. And so she went through the hole, and as she was going down through the hole, I saw a fish come up behind her. And I told Joe, hold the thought. And I went out there and put my sink tip down through there and I had a real mess in my line because it had been uncoiled in a long time, my steelhead stuff. And as I was straightening out the line, I saw my line past my tip straightening out. And then as this fish come up out of the water, I realized it was connected to my line. And I got my first steelhead in like 5 years, and I was in my shirt sleeves. I was in heaven. It was nice.
But now, where was that? And where was that? That was on what river?
It was on the Wenatchee River.
Oh, right. So you're in so Wenatchee is right on the banks of the Columbia, so you're still in an area where summer steelhead can get up to. There's no dams blocking them.
Oh, well, down below there is.
Yeah.
But there's dams along the Columbia that stop them from getting up there. But no, at that time they had a pretty healthy run, and Wenatchee is a real small personal river, and they had good road access, and it was good river to raft, and it was just, to me, it was just like the perfect river. And I had a really good, started about mid-August and went through November.
Yep.
The real fishing season. It was open pretty much all year except during the spawning season in the spring. But those are the times I guided. And I only guided like 2-3 times a week, but that was perfect for me.
That's right.
Yeah, I had a good time. I really enjoyed that.
That's cool. Yeah. So basically you started out in Western Washington fishing for winter steelhead, and then you went over the Cascade Range to the Wenatchee area, and you found the summer steelhead, right? And that's, again, the water is, you're in the summer, obviously. So you're in 80, 90, 100 degree weather, loving it. And so this is good. Okay. And then, like you said, the fly shop eventually went down there. I want to go back to the Angler's Autumn, that movie. So is there anywhere, could somebody find that out there online anywhere? Or what is that?
It was on YouTube.
Oh, it was? Okay. We'll take a look.
Yeah, you can look up Angler's Autumn, Bill and Boyd Marts.
Yeah, we'll take a look.
I think it's still on there. If not, give me a call and I can send you a thumb drive with it on there.
Yeah, we might, if anybody's interested listening now, we might send them your way as well. But no, this is good. Okay, so we got that. And I wanted to jump in. We'll circle back around, too, on some of the other stuff in your travels. But I'm interested in carp fishing. We've done a few episodes around the country on it. And it's one of those things. I want to hear a little bit on the history because I know you've been in it probably longer than most. When did you start carp fishing? When did that? Because you talked about a little bit in your history we talked about here. When did carp come in?
Early 90s. And it came on because my wife and I took this float trip down what's called the Winchester Wasteway. And when we first put in, there were carp everywhere. And I was trying to catch them and I couldn't. I didn't know what to do. But anyway, it always intrigued me. Then I had a fellow who worked for me in the Wenatchee area. His name is Darc Knobel. He has a fly shop now in Ephrata, Washington.
What's that one called?
It's a high desert fly angler. And he started to work for me. He was a skinny beanpole of a kid, but he just loved to fish. In fact, our interview was held on a lake fishing, and I always kid him that I caught more fish, but I think he let me just so he could get the job.
Right, smart.
So, but anyway, he had kind of the same idea, and so on his days off from where we were at, he lived in Ephrata, which is real close to Banks Lake. He started going over to Banks and trying to figure this out. And after about a year or maybe more, we finally found the real key to fly fishing for carp. And that is, they don't attack the fly. It's not like blind casting for trout. And it's not like river fishing for trout, or even, stripping a fly in for bass, which there are a lot of bass over there too in Banks Lake. It's more of a hunting game. We did it all by sight. There's a lot of shallow areas in Banks Lake. And the key was watching the fish's body language and putting the fly without scaring it with its fish, without spooking it. So you didn't fire a bullet down to them, and have it splash in front of them.
Yeah.
Had to kind of throw a little lobbing cast, maybe have it land a little bit past them, and then pull it in front of them. And then sometimes you can't see their head because it's in a cloud of mud. They're in there blowing into it and then picking up stuff that, come out. And then you watch the body language. And so you don't feel it. You just, the carp is nose down, tail up, and you watch the body shift. And as one guy pointed out to me, I didn't know until a long time later that it's actually one of the telltales, that register subconsciously, but you don't quite know what it is. It's like when people say, "How do you know it hit me?"
Yeah.
I just don't know, But what it was when they bent slightly, the sun would reflect off their scales slightly different.
Huh.
So you get this little flash almost to let you know that they've sucked in the fly, and before they spit it out, you give a strip set like you do bonefish, and then if you're on, then you raise the rod tip. So that took a couple years to figure out. And when we finally did, it was like an epiphany. Geez, we now know how to fish for them. Now, and then we had the whole lake to ourselves, but probably due to our own ego, I guess we wanted to let everybody know how much we knew about it. We showed all these people how to do it. And then we started this invitational in the later 90s, and it was called the Schmoots Clooper, SCHMOOTS Clooper. And it was in a book, let me think, a John Gierach book.
Oh, yeah. Another Day in Paradise.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, look in there under carp. And in there, one of the paragraphs will say, it was a hot and windless afternoon, and the carp were clooping the schmoots. And we always liked that saying. So I used it for a while. And then this last time I went around using it, I actually got permission from him. And he said, well, you don't need my permission. Just don't, as long as you're not selling the name or anything. So anyway, yeah, it's always been Schmoots Clooper to me. So I revived it through the fly shop here in Seattle. And then now I'm doing it on my own.
Is that Dave McCoy's fly shop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah. Have you interviewed him before?
Yeah. We've had Dave on, and John Gierach's been on a couple times.
Okay.
We'll put links out to those episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyway, we started with him, did a couple of them, then I decided to do it on my own, and he did too, because he just didn't have time to mess with this. And so I've been doing it. Next year will be our 7th year, I think, since I've come back to it.
Oh, wow. So right now, as we speak, you can go get involved in that invitational.
Yeah, it's an invitational, but I need to know about it. You can't just show up or be there, because I do limit it somewhat. There were about 30 people there this year, and that's just about the limit.
Oh, okay. And if somebody wanted to find out about that or get involved, what should they do?
Bill Marts flyfishing.com.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a part in there under events, and it's under Schmoots Clooper. And then they can get in touch with me there, or I can give you a phone number. Because we had several people said, I've been looking to get into it, and I've heard about this, and I've been wanting to try it. So it's open to, people who've done it for years and years and years to people who've never done it.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody. I mean, not everybody likes walking in the mud, and
Oh, right. Yeah, describe that a little bit. What is it? What makes it, the invitation or what it is today? Like, describe the event. How does it work? Is it a one-day event?
No, it starts on Friday evening in July at 6:00. And during that, I've already bought maps for everybody of Banks Lake. And it's a detailed map that show all the little bays and shallow areas. And we literally put X's on the map. And it goes around to people who have been fishing this for a long time, and they put X's on their favorite spots. And then just to throw them off, I put an X in the middle of the lake, just to see what they're going to do about that, because there's nothing out there but deep water. But it's a time to introduce people. It's a time that people that haven't done it before, they get to see the flies that are used. They get to see a place where they can drive to. If they're not boating, if they're boating, they can see where they can drive to, and boat to. And it's just a real gathering. And probably more than anything now, it's become, because since we've had people come to it, every year since it started. And it's kind of a social event also. Friday night after that, we have a grill there, and people can grill their own food, or you can go into town to one of the restaurants there and have dinner, and then come back. And we have usually there's a fire band going on by that time over there, but we have a propane fireplace, baked fireplace. So we all gather around that and tell lies and stories. And,
That's cool.
yeah, it gives people a chance to get to know one another. And to me, that's one of the biggest parts of it since I've been doing it so long.
This is cool.
Yeah, it's just a cool place to be. We take over the whole motel.
Is this in Coulee City or Grand Coulee?
It's in Coulee City at the Alacozy.
This is interesting because as you think about where this is, Banks Lake, we've done a lot of episodes on the Columbia Basin. It's one of the largest basins in the western part of the U.S., right? The river goes up into Canada. We've had episodes up in Canada. But there's this interesting thing about the Columbia, right? There's a lot of dams. I'm not sure how many there are, 20 or 30 major dams. Do you know how Banks Lake fits into the Columbia system? Like why it's there? How is it connected?
It's connected because irrigation. For Banks Lake, there wouldn't be all the farms there.
Gotcha. So Banks Lakes is there to irrigate all of that eastern part of Washington, Moses Lake and stuff like that.
And
then it comes out in the Winchester Wasteway, and then water is siphoned off of that into the farms.
And it eventually, does it go into the Moses? Because I fished the Potholes Reservoir areas. Does it eventually flow into that area?
Yes, you're exactly right.
It does, Pothole. It's kind of interesting because basically I see it now. Yeah, the Columbia, historically, and it still does go to the west of Banks Lake, and then it wraps around and then heads up. Yeah. But basically this is, and is it at Grand Coulee Dam? Is that where? That's
Coulee Dam's right at the head of the lake.
Yeah, so you got this giant, which is, isn't Grand Coulee the one dam that has no fish ladder?
You're right.
Yeah. So
and it does. The water levels changed, but it's not like a tide. It's not like, okay, I can look at, a year ahead of time and see what the tides are going to be. The water levels changed, and that really taxes a person's imagination and how to go after these fish. Because when it's really high and they're releasing water, the water can get kind of cold. That puts those fish off. But then when it drops and drops and drops and drops, then it warms up, and then those fish come up into the shallows. And it's not that they stop eating, it's just hard to get to them to see where they're eating and see them while they're eating. And that makes a big difference.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is great. And I want to touch more on the carp. I just wanted to wrap this up just so I see it. But yeah, I think I got it. So basically Grand Coulee is the last. So like you said, Winchester or Wenatchee, you got those summer steelhead that can make it up because there's fish ladders. But once they get to Grand Coulee, which is kind of the crazy thing, right? That stops any anadromous fish from going up for whatever it is, next 1,000 miles into Canada.
Yeah. Well, and above there, of course, is then they start those, the reservoirs will start.
Yeah, I see that.
Above there, and then they have those big, the fish pens up there. They have some escapees from that, which make for some pretty large trout.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. Waters West Fly Fishing Outfitters is your go-to resource for spey and swung fly techniques for the OP and beyond. They are known for their deep selection of unique, high-quality fly tie materials, and they are the gateway to some of the great steelhead rivers in the country. I was able to get out on the water with Ed, and it was an amazing day. We hit the shop early, met him at the shop. We fired up the old vehicle and headed out on the river. Ed is the type of guy that you feel comfortable right from minute one, and it was a good day. We ended the trip 4-buying into this unimproved boat ramp, pulling the boat out, and we ended up with a great opportunity and landed a very nice chromer and had a few other touches. Fished one of the great rivers in the country. It was amazing. Not only do they cover steelhead, but all species in the area, and they have a passion for all fish that swim up or live around salt. They can outfit any angler from the beginner to the most hardcore fishing bum you can imagine. They have a great online store, fast shipping, and you will be supporting conservation when you support Waters West. Please check in with Ed and Kyle right now to say hi and let them know you heard from them on this podcast. And you can do that right now, wetflyswing.com/waterswest. So that's it. And then, so Banks Lake is this, like a lot of these cool places. I mean, we did a carp episode in the middle of Arizona, like right in, you know what I mean? And so that's the cool thing about carp they're everywhere. They can be everywhere.
That's right.
So Banks Lake, so basically describe that a little bit, like you were talking about it a little bit, but if somebody comes there or a similar lake, how do they find these fish? How would you find carp if you're out there the first time on the lake?
Well, what I look for is shallow water because it's all sight fishing.
Yeah.
And during their spawning season, which starts anywhere from mid-May and will last through even early July if it's a really cold summer, they will be, depending on the water, they can be in water that'll be dry the rest of the year up there spawning. And then they're really difficult to catch at that time, but it's a good time to see if there are fish in that area and what they're doing. Like I said, they're very difficult to catch. You've got one female trying to get away from about 7 or 8 males chasing after her, and but it gives you a really good idea about how many are in there and what's going on. The next best thing, or one of the best things then, is getting a map. It shows shallow areas and some of the elevations in the lake. And if you can find shallow areas, especially extended shallow areas, which we call flats, just like in saltwater, then find a way to get to it, either by road or hiking in or by boat. And then you can look on a clear water day, you can look for tracks. And the tracks, have you saltwater fished before?
A little bit, very little. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't done any of the major, flat stuff. But.
Well, on flats, bonefish make a track. And it's sort of a flat, if you imagine a flat bottom to it, and then an oval. It's like a half an oval, I'll put it that way, in there. And it's buried in the mud. That's where they put their nose down in the mud, and they blow, and then they bring up the bugs and crustaceans and stuff. And the carp make the same kind of tracks. And you can look in this area. If you see a lot of them, there may not be a carp in sight, but you can be rest assured that maybe later in the day they'll be in there, or maybe tomorrow they'll be in there. But if you find the tracks, then it's a place where carp, come in to feed. Now, if it's all rocky, then you can't tell tracks. You just have to start in where they're at and then change from there. I've probably walked the whole shoreline as much as I can for maybe, on and off for over the years, maybe for 20 miles, 15 miles up from Coulee City.
Okay. On the east side or the west side?
On the east side.
Yeah.
The west side is pretty much all cliffs.
Oh, okay.
Except in the extreme south end and the extreme north end. But the rest of it is all pretty, drops right off into deep water.
Gotcha. Nice. So you've covered. So basically, if somebody was going out to a new lake, like you said, they can just look for shallow water. That's a starting point. You got to have shallow water. And is there too shallow of water? Is there a perfect depth?
I've seen them. Perfect depth to me is like knee to mid-thigh. And I'm 5'10", so that gives you an idea how deep it is. And if it's really, really muddy, it's usually, if there hasn't been a windstorm, it's usually because there's a lot of fish in there looking for food. And if you can't see them, which can happen sometimes, then we've used an indicator. You know how deep it is because you're standing in it.
Yeah.
So you just set the fly down so it's about 3 inches above what the bottom would be and cast out, and then just retrieve as slow as you can. And you just watch that indicator because it doesn't always, suck down or dart off. It just kind of moves, and then you can set the hook.
Wow. What would be a good carp fly for an indicator, or if you're out there fishing?
Well, I've got a fly that I call Bugeye Carp Wooly, and it's kind of in fact, I've got it tattooed on my thumb. So when people ask me, I just show them my thumb. My grandson got into it this last year, and he got into fly tying. So he came over one day, and we tied this fly up. And he says, I want to get this tattooed. He's got a lot of tattoos. My granddaughter is a tattoo artist, and my son is a tattoo artist. So I said, well, I'm going to get one too. And he said, I'm going to have it on my thumb. And I said, ooh, God, that sounds like it's going to hurt. I said, no, I'll get one with you. So we've got matching tattoos on our thumbs.
Wow. What does that fly, if you could just describe a little bit, what does that look like?
Well, it's a carp woolly, so there's no tail. the material is usually just chenille. It can be black chartreuse, variegated, all the different kinds of colors, but my favorite is black.
Mm-hmm.
And then chartreuse in really, really muddy water.
Mm.
And it can be tied on a size, anywhere from a size 6 to size 8 hook, 10 hook maybe. And I put on the bug eyes are just eyes that I set right above the point, mounted on what would be if the hook is in your vise would be the top of the fly. And I do that rather than wrap lead around the body, because this way I can see how much weight it is, because it's very deep. I might try a heavier fly. If it's really shallow and clear, I'll put on maybe bead chain eyes that have hardly any weight at all. And I trim it so that it'll trim which in the water, the eyes will make that turn point up as it goes down. And then I'll trim the bottom of it. And then on the sides, I'll leave the fibers as I palmer forward to make, like a woolly bugger or woolly worm. And so they'll act like not rudders, but as outriggers, so that fly will sit there on the bottom with a point up on it. And that's the way it'll ride through the water. So almost all the fish that I hook with that fly are right in the upper lip, right in the very front.
Yeah, they're in the front. Okay, and then you put those eyes, so you like the bead eyes you'd put right above the point, so that's kind of almost like mid body. And why do that versus putting them in towards the front of the hook, maybe towards the hook eye?
Well, towards the front and towards the hook eye is that it makes it ride different in the water. And sometimes that's not bad. When I want the rear end sticking up, I've put like little foam strips on red, like red material, like sometimes chenille or gummy, that gummy material. And I want it to float with that tip up. Sometimes I'll put those eyes up front on the bottom, so that on the top, again, so it'll float point up, but the back, and I'll sometimes glue a foam strip on it, so it kind of raises the back and has that tail wagging around up there. So, but mostly I put them on top because this way it doesn't close the gap.
Yeah.
If I put it on the bottom, it tends to close the gap to the hook, and then I get more hookups this way.
Gotcha. And what is the hook you would use for this fly? Just like a long shank?
No, actually I use a regular shank. Not too long, but a regular short shank hook. That Arex hooks actually has a good short shank, very sharp, wide gap hook model that works very well. And if they're big fish and you're fishing around reeds and stuff, you need to make sure it's not going to straighten out on you. Sometimes like mustad hooks, which we used for years, was 9671 or 9670. They would straighten out if you're trying to keep a big fish from going in the reeds, because once they're in the reeds, they're gone.
Oh, you're done. What would be a big fish?
My biggest so far is 27.5 pounds.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah, that was on the Columbia River.
That was on the Columbia, not in the lake.
Not in Banks Lake or anything.
Wow, 27
Columbia
pounds.
River has some really monstrous carp. It's hard to fish it from shore, though, or without a boat.
Gotcha. So what was that 27-pounder? What was that fight like?
Well, it towed the boat around for a while.
Did it really?
Yeah. My friend Darc and I were doing. He was poling the boat, and he's got a pole that he uses just like, flats fishing. And we were in a shallow area with a lot of lily pads. And we've done it so much together, I just put my hand back, so he stopped. And I used a 2-hand rod sometimes, and we're back like that. And I use it to dap rather than cast to these fish, because it's real still and they're kind of in their logged up or sleep mode. They're taking a siesta in the afternoon. I could just see his tail out the back end. I couldn't see his head in the front of the weeds. So I just lowered the fly so it didn't scare him. And then I watched the tail. And as soon as I saw the tail wiggle, I stripped the fly. It was on him, and I brought it up.
Wow.
Yeah. So we we chased them around a while.
No kidding. So are these carp, do you think, are they smarter than trout? Or are they pretty much the same, very similar?
There's, I don't know if they're smarter, but what they do is harder to predict. They're not as predictable as trout. And whether that makes them smarter or not, I don't know. We like to say they're smarter than trout just to, get under the skin of trout fishermen who don't like carp. But they're just really, really difficult to predict where they're going to be at a certain time, what they're going to like. Like if they're in the rocks and stuff, the crawdad patterns are usually really good. And if they're in the mud, that little carp wooly or flies like that are good. And if they're swimming around, like for a while in July, this was we had really great water for this Schmoots Clooper. They were taking damsels.
Oh, wow. On the surface?
No. Unfortunately, below the surface. I've never caught one on the surface.
No. So you never got one on the surface?
Not at banks. My friend has, Darc. He's taken them on grasshopper patterns, but I never have been there at the right time to do that.
Oh, right. But they do take occasionally a surface bug.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. This is great. And so, and I'm curious about when you started, you said the 90s. What was it like in the 90s? Did you hear of anybody else carp fishing? Did you know of any other fly anglers out there doing it?
No. I figured that there were, but I figured that they just kept it they were what I call closet carpers. Yeah.
That's right. When did it start getting, because that was over 30 years ago. When do you think it started getting on the map where you started hearing more about it?
Oh, probably in the 2010s, in 2000 to 2010, it really started going. A lot of it has to do with there's a lot of people out there fishing now, and to find a fish that is challenging, and especially during the really hot dog days of summer, then it's sometimes just not right to go fishing for trout. The waters are too warm, they're too hot, and you can go after carp, though. Hell, you can take them for a walk after you catch them and then let them go back.
They're fine.
Yeah, they're okay. Yeah.
Right. That's the cool thing about carp. And water temperature. So as far as conditions, if it's, you talked about, the spawning period, May, through early July. But I mean, when can you fish carp? What is the timing? Can you fish it throughout the year? When can you not fish carp?
Probably dead midwinter. Although I know a few guys who know places that has open water that have carp, and they fish them all through the winter, and they catch them. They feed a lot, but I don't go out during that time just because it's cold. That's one of the reasons I like carp fishing, because it's during the warm water. I can wet wade, and
that's great. So you could fish it. So basically, when you start in the spring, do you fish it out through? When do you stop fishing for carp?
About this time. They're still feeding a lot, and actually through September is not bad, but the sun starts going so far south that you can't get a good angle on them to see them.
Oh, right. Because you have to see this is you're spotting them and you're putting the fly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you need that midsummer, from late May through mid-September, you need that time period like between 10 and 3 where the sun is up a ways and you can see in the water.
Yeah, right. You got to be able to see. And how close can you get to carp? I mean, do you try to get a certain distance, or what's the closest you've ever been to a carp that you've caught?
Oh, that actually caught?
Yeah.
I did find one that was kind of resting up on shore once, and I put my hand under its belly and I tried to scoop him out, but he slipped out of my hand.
Right. So you can sneak up on him. So if you're kind of in a boat, you could be boat or wading or off the shore or whatever, but you see the fish, say it's 30 feet away. Talk about, how you drop that in. Describe that.
Okay. You want the landing to be as soft as possible. That also came back to me. I just came back from Mexico, and we were fishing baby tarpon and bonefish. And my buddy down there, he's been guiding and fishing. He's kind of known as a real celebrity in the Yucatan for fly fishing. He's one of the best fly fishers I know, one of the fishiest guys I know down there. But I was having trouble spooking some of the tarpon off, and he says, Bill, don't you remember? You just let it lob in there. Let that fly just settle down on the water, not fire it in there like a bullet. And it brought me back to my senses. And that's what you try to do with carp. And let it lob in there, especially if it's real clear. You need to put it out if the fish is moving, if it's feeding and there's mud coming up around it, the closer you can put it to the fish. And where you want the fly to actually drop down and where the fish can see it is almost right in front of its nose, just slightly off center. So one of his eyes can pick it up, and then that's when its body turns to get it. That's your telltale to set the hook.
Right, when you see that body, or that, like you said, that shiny, that little
right,
change.
That body movement. So that's when you do it on really clear water. Sometimes you're going to have to fish with a single hand rod and get it way out there, fish 30, 40 feet, put it out in front of them so it doesn't spook them. And then when they get close, start kind of a hopping retrieve to get their attention and then see if they'll come to it. There's one thing I will mention is that the last 3 or 4 years that I've done, because I was fishing for them with my two-handed rod, which seems a little sacrilegious when you put $1,000 two-handed rod that's meant for steelhead and sea trout and such, and then you've got your Hardy reel on there, and you go out there and you dap for carp. Well, I figure it's very fitting. Yeah, I mean, it's royalty fittings for a royalty fish. But what I did was several years ago, a friend of mine said it wasn't a friend of mine, it was my brother, a friend of his was getting rid of her bamboo garden. And so we went over there and cut a bunch of bamboo. And so I made a bamboo pole, and I tried tenkara. Tenkara doesn't work very well with the carp because when you're waiting for them, you don't know if you're going to see them 10 feet in front of you or 30 feet in front of you. Tenkara, it's a fixed line at the tip. You have no way of pulling in line unless you back up, and you have no way of extending line, unless you go forward. So it's always this fixed line. So I made this bamboo pole with 3 guides on it. It's about 13 to 15 feet long. I put 3 guides on it. I wrapped a handle made of parachute cord, and I put a loop in the back. To that loop in the back, I put about 40 feet of running line. Like I had a bunch of old fly lines, so I just cut the running line off of them. And then to that, I attach anywhere from 6 to 12 feet of leader. And then I use that. If I see the fish in close and I can get down on my carp crouch, way down low, and I can put that bamboo pole right next to the surface and just have maybe a foot of line past the tip and just kind of jig it right in front of their eye. Or if I see them quite a ways off, I can actually put out some line and with not very good accuracy, but get it in the general vicinity and then drag it like a drag and drop. You drag it in front of them and then let it drop. And then when you hook them, you do the same thing, just strip that hook, pull up on the rod, let it take the line till it gets to the end, and then you just hang on. You just try to move them around. And then that's also when you want a stout hook, so it won't bend them out.
Today's episode is sponsored by Jackson Hole Fly Company. They've been designing and manufacturing fly fishing equipment and flies since 1978 in their home base in Wyoming. In 2020, they launched jhflyco.com and started selling gear directly online to anglers all over the country. You can go ahead and right now check out their huge selection of rods, reels, fly lines, tools, accessory. And right now, if you go to jhflyco.com/swing, you can get 25% off your first order. Just like Amazon, they'll ship everything directly to your door, saving you time and money. But unlike Amazon, you'll be supporting a great fly shop and this podcast by simply grabbing a few products, maybe just a couple of flies. Check it out. There we go. Get free shipping right now. All orders over $50 and get that 25% off your first order. jhflyco.com/swing. Okay, back to the show. What's the advantage of using, say, like that cane pole versus a two-handed spey rod versus a single-handed rod?
The single-handed rod is really hard to cast in close. You can't cast it because most people, when they try to cast close, they try to cast harder, or
Yeah.
not harder to get it in close, you know. And if you try to just rock it out like you can with a two-headed rod or a cane pole, it's so short you can't get out of the line. So when it's that short, a lot of time the fish is seeing you, and it'll take off. So I use a two-headed rod because you can make a little bit of a cast out of ways, and you can bring it in really close because I can choke way up on that bamboo rod, get like halfway in the middle, and use a very short line on them. Whereas a two-headed rod, you can't do that.
Oh, I see. I gotcha.
Excuse me, a one-headed rod,
yeah,
you
one-headed.
can't do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one-handed.
two-headed rod, you can.
Yeah. If you could have one rod for carp all around out there, what would the rod be like, length, weight?
Well, it'd probably be around a 12-foot two-headed rod, you know, with a click reel on it.
Yeah, like a 6-weight or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just your normal summer steelhead rod.
Yeah, right, exactly. In fact, that's what I had, 11.5-foot 6-weight because I can single-hand it.
Yeah. It's like almost like a switch rod.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, perfect.
Yes.
So that's it. So yeah, the switch rod would be great. I didn't even think about that, but so you can do like you said, the dap. I mean, there's all sorts of techniques, it sounds like, with carp to get them. The key is that you don't want to be you spooking them. They're spooky fish, right? That's kind of the key.
That's what the key is right there. Yeah. Sometimes you can wade right in the middle of it, and I just stand there. And as I see them move in closer, then I'll start dapping in front of them. I had one that sometimes you hear him slurping, clooping the schmoots, and I saw him working these weeds, and I would gradually, when he would start clooping, I would take a step forward, and I tried to cut him off at the pass, and I literally waited for him with my rod out in front where I thought he might be. I waited for him to come up, and I dropped my fly right in his mouth. Not casting, just dropped it in his open mouth.
No kidding.
Yeah, I don't know who was more surprised, that fish or me, but it was kind of fun.
Nice, awesome. And when you worked at the fly shop, remind me again, what year was it when you moved out to the fly shop in Reading?
It was 2005.
Yeah, 2005. So when you did that, was carp? Did they have any carp programs there? Or was that a talk at all?
None whatsoever.
No. So you went there. Is that when your saltwater started?
No, actually, I started saltwater quite a bit before that, and that's one reason I got the job because I'd been to Venezuela and Baja and Christmas Island and the Cook Islands and a lot of different places already.
Yeah. Okay. And
Bahamas.
So you'd been already traveling. So you went to the fly shop in Reading. Talk about that. When you went there, was that kind of like a hosted program, or what was your role there?
Most of your time is just sitting in the office with earphones on, much like what I'm doing here. And people would call and they would be directed to me if, say, I'm looking to go take a trip down to the Bahamas. Well, when I first got there, it's like they gave me 3 weeks on Andros Island, just Andros Island. They sent me down there for 3 weeks to go to all of the resorts on that island. So I put together an itinerary and I traveled it for 3 weeks. So I knew every one of the places that we recommended going. And so the phone call would be directed to me and I could find out by asking them questions, what they want to do, when they want to go, what they can expect, the time of year makes a big difference of what to expect. So, or Christmas Island or the Yucatan. I had done a lot in the Yucatan before that too, before I went there.
Amazing. So you've done a lot of traveling, and so that's kind of what they did. So they bring you down as like an expert, or you'd be there, and people call, and you'd get to check out the places on your own and explore, and then come back and talk about them.
Right. Well, they'd send me down. That was my job. I even got paid while I was down there.
Yeah, sounds like a great job.
Yeah.
So the traveling, are you still doing a lot of traveling, or is that something you miss, or what's that look like now?
Well, 3 years ago, I started putting together a trip down to the Yucatan again. My friend who lives in Isla Obosh, which is a very northern tip of the Yucatan, that's where he fishes, and that's where I've fished and taken a lot of people up there. And I've been working with him for almost 30 years, sending people to him and such. So I've been doing that for quite a while, and I'd fish all up and down the Yucatan on my own. And plus the fly shop had what they call an exclusive down in the lower part of the Yucatan. So they sent me down there to see what that was like too. So I knew the Yucatan. I knew Mexico fly fishing better than I knew Washington fly fishing for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've been going down there so often and so much. And then Venezuela was in there too. So I've been there 4 or 5 times. So I came to them with a background in traveling and hosting trips. So after I got to know these places, then I would get together groups to go to different places. And they would send me like to Alaska. They sent me down to Tierra del Fuego to fish for the sea run browns. I really like that. That's just super fishing. And and up to Canada, fishing a few places. So yeah, I got to see other places besides just saltwater, warm saltwater.
Right. You checked out all the major. Well, and now if you could, would you be traveling, as much now? Is that something you would like? Or I always think of that myself because I'm at this point where I just want to do as much traveling as possible. But I think that probably eventually once you've done it all, maybe that gets a little bit old too.
I don't know if it gets so old, but you get to accept it doesn't get old. You get old.
Yeah, you get old. The traveling isn't as easy, right?
Right. The traveling isn't quite as easy, but it was like this last time. I just couldn't. I've got things going on with my legs and stuff, and I just can't stand up on the bow like I used to, and I can't get up and down off the bow like I used to. So when I go out with these groups and things, I'll go out with different people. Most I just go along to take pictures and hang out in the boat, and so
yeah.
I actually don't fish too much when I go on them anymore. So, and I'm happy with that. Long time ago, when my wife and I were first married, my dad passed away at 67 years old. And I said to her, and she said to me, we both agreed, we're going to do stuff while we can, because I could get hit by a car tomorrow and be paralyzed, from the waist down or something. And then you'd have all these regrets that you didn't do what you could. So as long as we took, we took care of our kid and we took care of our house, we always had a place, we had shelter, we had food, we took care of our kid. And as long as we could, we would do these things, as long as we could do it. And so I'm at the position, I'm 78 years old, so I can't walk as fast. My balance isn't near as good, and so I don't do as much of that as I used to, and I don't want to, and plus I don't like being gone that long from my wife either. So
yeah, I hear you. No, I think that you're doing amazing because I didn't know how old you were, but yeah, 78, and you're still doing trips down to Mexico. That's that's pretty awesome. So it shows that you're still doing that. I've talked to a number of people on here on this podcast in their 90s, including Joe Humphreys and Joan Wolfe and plenty of people that, in fact, Frank Moore, before he passed away, I met him in person and I shook his hand, and I mean, I thought he was going to crush my hand. He was so strong, So I feel like the back of the day, the 80 or 90 is the new 70 or 60, right? It feels like that, as long as you take care of yourself and you do good stuff, then you're going to probably live a pretty healthy life, right?
That's what I'm hoping. Although I've done a lot of bad stuff to my life too, but I hope I can just keep going and I'll probably won't. That's 2 weeks gone at one time, and I just don't like being away from home.
That's a lot. No, I'm kind of the same way. I like the traveling. We have a kind of a hosted school program, and I've been, get out, and I just find that just being out with the people and, like you said, taking pictures, the traveling. I really like the traveling. I kind of enjoy all of that.
Yeah.
So it's fun for me. But the fishing is it's kind of crazy to say, right? But it's almost secondary. It's not even, if I don't catch a fish, it's not the end of the world anymore.
It's not crazy because I got to tell you that I used to be able to fish by myself and alone all the time because, quite frankly, I enjoyed my company and I was on my schedule. Didn't have to worry about anybody else. Now, I don't fish alone as much, not because of thinking of safety or anything, because I just don't care for it as much. I like to be with people. That's why I like the Schmoots Clooper. You know,
Yeah, right,
we had 30 people there interested in one thing.
right.
You know, well, excuse me, two things: catching a few fish, but also, like I mentioned before, the social part. And now I find the older I get, the more I like the social part.
So if that on that, and say it again, the Schmoots Clooper.
Schmoots Clooper,
Yeah, Schmoots Clooper. On that event, if you could have, build this thing up to 300 people, or if somebody could take it to, another level, would that be something that, would be interesting to see, or is 30 people just the right amount?
Yeah, 25 to 35 people is perfect. It's just a 9-room motel that we take over, and then other people will sleep in the back of their trucks.
Oh, right. That's perfect. Yep, dirt bagging it.
Right. She has places there to park their trucks.
Oh, perfect.
Vehicles, and there is another motel in town. If the Alacozy is full, then they go into this other place. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. This is great. Okay. Well, I think, we touched on some of the carp stuff. I think you really provided some interesting tips there. I think what we'll do is hold that maybe for the next one, and we will, dig more into that and everything else you have going. Maybe give us a heads up before we get out of here. And now we're heading into, towards the end of summer, looking ahead and maybe this year into next. What do you have coming? Anything you want to give a shout out? What you have coming with your website? Anything with fly fishing?
Not so much. This is the time that I like to steelhead fish.
Okay, yeah.
And so if there's stuff that's open to me, I can't wade the tricky waters like I used to, but I would like to get out and do some steelheading and such. But other than that, I'll use this time to tie flies. I also like to carve, wood carvings.
Cool.
So I got plenty of scars on my left hand to show it.
Yeah. What do you use for a carving? What would be a good carving knife to use? My kids love carving. What would be a good one?
Well, there are carving knives that you can buy, and they're shaped to your hand. They have kind of a curved shape. That's what I use in different sizes, and I also use different gouges and things like that.
Gotcha. What do you carve?
Oh, everything from small amulets like fish, they can be on necklaces, to larger. I'm looking at one now that's a fish like coming up out of the water, but it's coming up out of a stump that I found on the Skycomish River. Mm-hmm. And it's still got rocks embedded in it and everything. So I've got a couple of the big ones like that. And when I first got going on it, I liked carving the Northwest Indian stuff. I'd look at their carvings and copy their stuff because it was so cool.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. You're kind of in an area. Isn't there a giant tribal, right? Just up north of you? What's the Cole? I want to say there's one big. I'm trying to think. You're in Wenatchee now, or what town are you in?
No, I'm in Seattle.
Oh, right. You're back in Seattle. Yeah, I was going to say it was the.
You're thinking of the Colville.
Yeah, Colville. Right. Yeah. So you're back in Seattle. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you got that going. Then tell me. I want to hear on steelhead real quick. First, do you remember your first steelhead you caught on a fly?
Yeah, I do. On the fly, it was. I wanted to make a split bamboo rod, and there was a fellow in Seattle. His name was Don Holbrook, and he had brought a lot of the Tonkin cane over. I think it was from Korea, China, and anyway, he brought it over and in the 50s, and he just pulled columns of bamboo out of that for years and years and years and years, and he put on the class every year. And it was just one of the most interesting classes I've ever taken like that. And I learned a lot about rods, and their tapers and what makes a rod cast like it does. And I made an 8-weight split bamboo rod. You plane it, you spend hours. Well, I put about 130 hours on it. I'd never used a plane in my life, so I didn't know what I was doing. Guys that really know what they're doing can put one out in about 30 hours, 30, 40 hours. But I put in about 130 on this just because I didn't know what I was doing. But I finally got it made, and I went up to the North Fork of the Stillaguamish and took it up there with me, and I was going to use it for the first time and walk down. I was pretty proud of it, and there was a guy at one of the places I've been before, but I hadn't caught any steelhead, but one of the places there, and there was a guy fishing there, so I didn't want to, move in on his water. So he said, yeah, right downstream a little bit, there's a really good place down there. So I ended up calling it the Maple Hole because it had this huge maple tree that went out over the river, and you could climb up in it and you can look down and see if there's any steelhead.
Oh,
there.
wow.
Yeah, but that isn't where I caught it. It's where it went out of the hole. It took like almost a 90-degree, I'll say a 60-degree curve around into another pool. And I put the fly down through there. I think it was a skycomber sunrise, and I caught a fish. I hooked a steelhead. Couldn't believe it. I hooked that thing, and I played it, and I got it in. And this was in 72 or 73.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I killed the fish, and then brought it back up, and I told the guy that was still fishing, I said, "Thanks a lot." And he said, "Where'd you get that?" I said, "Right where you told me. I appreciate it. What a nice thing to do." And I could tell right then that he just wanted me out of his pool.
Right.
He just wanted me to move on down.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was my first one. It was about 6 pounds.
Yeah. 6 pounds. Was this a winter steelhead or a summer?
Summer steelhead.
Yeah, summer steelhead.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. And skycomber, and that's awesome. And then what is your?
No, that was on the Stillaguamish.
Oh, that was on the Stillaguamish. Yeah,
Yeah.
with the skycomber sunrise.
Right.
Cool. And then what was your? So right now, if you were to go out summer steelhead fishing, what would be your one steelhead fly you'd put on?
I don't have one favorite. I'll put it. I do have one favorite fly. In fact, I've got it tattooed on my arm.
Okay.
On my other arm, not the one on my
Right.
thumb. I've got another one that has a steelhead fish and then my favorite fly that's on there. It's called it's Bill's Bead Butt Burlap.
Oh, wow.
So we just shorten it to BBB. And actually, there's another B in there, but it's just too hard to say 4 B's. And since my son is a tattoo artist, I've been thinking for years, what do I want as a tattoo that's going to be on my body for the rest of my life? And I finally narrowed it down to kind of what I wanted. And then I tried to find a picture of the steelhead that I wanted. And I finally remembered that I had one in my own archives. And do you know Justin Miller?
Yeah.
Do you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know him. I know of the name. I think
Yeah.
we've probably talked on email. Yeah.
He and I have used to go up to Thompson every year in BC. And we went up there one year, and it was just so cold. It was just miserably cold. And we got up there kind of late, so we had a chance to go out and fish one run. And so he was down below me, and I fished my run. And I finally got up to the car where my brother was waiting. He wasn't fishing at the time. He likes to take photographs. So I said, "This is the truth." I said to my brother, I said, "Now you watch." It was a pretty steep hill that I just came up. And there's a pretty steep hill to get down to where Justin was. You watch, he's going to yell here in the next few minutes. He's got a fish on, and I've got to go back down this hill so I can take pictures. And pretty soon I hear this yipping and hollering, and I went down there, and it was so cool. It was right at dark. There was ice all over his waders. There was ice caps on all the rocks around there. And this fish was beautiful, about 14 pounds of hen fish that was just rosy cheeked and gorgeous. And we took some pictures, and then he let it go, and then we went back up. And then I remembered that fish. I want that fish, I said, just before it hits the fly. And so I gave my son the idea. Then I gave him my favorite fly, the one I told you about. Mm-hmm. So he put that on there, although that is the one that was used. He put that fly on my arm, and that's just the coolest. In fact, there was an article we did on it in Swing the Fly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I did an article,
cool.
And they printed it in there. There's a good picture of it.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, we'll try to look up that article if we can. And and check in. I love that we wrap this up with steelhead. We've got a lot of people that love steelhead. And so this is great. Good, Bill. Well, I think we'll leave it there for now. We'll send everybody out to billmartsflyfishing.com if they want to check with you or connect with some of the stuff you have going. And I just want to thank you for coming in today and for all the years and all the great work you've put together. I know we've had some people recommend you for the show, so I'm glad we can get you on and hear the story. So thanks for your time, Bill.
Well, thank you for having me on. I enjoy. You can tell I like talking about this.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country, so if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are, and I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.